Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. And with us today is somebody who's not mediocre. She's not very noisy today. In fact, she's kind of quiet. Haven't seen her this quiet in ages. Enjoy this. Not just kidding. Susan, Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
You are so mean. Yes,
but we love you.
As you can tell, I'm a little hoarse, so I'm going to keep my comments brief.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big bear, so a little horse, it works out well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, she had too much fun during the holidays. And Happy New Year, by the way, Susan.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Well, let's start the show. Well, today we have a great guest. Would you like to do the honors?
Yes, I'd be happy to. We thought we'd start the year with a person who's really doing a lot to make the world a better place. Shawn Alyea, who is director at Dayspring Behavioral Health Services in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you, Susan, and Rick. Glad to be here.
We're glad you could make it.
We'd like to start with a few questions. Shawn, what is it exactly that you do at Dayspring?
Well, at this point, I'm the Northeast Regional Director, which means that I'm involved in supervision of therapists and case managers and family support workers who provide services to the community. Also involved in marketing and growth of our programs throughout the state of Oklahoma.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We talked a little bit earlier via emails a couple of times that I've written a lot of mental health services training. And the first thing I have to tell you is thank you for your service, because people don't realize it's not an easy job at all.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate that very much. I enjoy the work. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, and it's a lot of times for people who nobody wants to talk about, or they don't want to deal with their issues or the challenges, but there's a lot of things that can be done. And what kind of clientele do you get at the center?
Oh, we have a wide range of individuals and families that we see. We see some actually in our office setting, and numerous families or individuals are seen within the schools or out in the community, even home visits in particularly. I think that's probably one of the most successful environments we can work in. We have everyone from age 3 and actually some infant services, but typically age 3 up to, I've worked with an individual who is 97.
Wow, that's pretty good. So what are the typical range of challenges, problems, disorders that you folks encounter, and especially the most common ones that as a community you encounter?
Sure. Across the board, probably depression would be number one, and the symptoms that are involved with depression. I would say anxiety would probably be our secondary focus for treatment, and this is just in general. Yeah. But those two seem to be very common amongst the community that we serve.
It's funny. I keep thinking we live in an anxious time. We're always at wars. There's a lot of issues going on. And it never seems to go away. It never seems to lighten up. I used to tell people, turn off your TVs. Don't watch the news. You'll probably feel a lot better.
Yes, well, those challenges continue. And I think that's unfortunately part of the human nature. Mm-hmm. Something we strive to improve upon with coping skills, but that's the nature of the beast, and we will probably continue to have those issues for a long time to come. We've never been able to resolve those things before.
It's interesting. My wife's mom had schizophrenia, And she had it from the early 30s, and she died about 89. And for the most part, she had a really hard, probably 20 years from 30 to 50, and then the meds got better.
Right.
And then she was able to survive pretty well. And in her last 10 years of life, they put her on Abilify, which is a very common newer generation med, and she flourished, really, and short of old age taking effect. She was much, much better, much less side effects, and she was, I would say, happy. And
that's wonderful.
And that makes a big difference. But I think back on, my wife and I have been married 31 years, and when we first got married, nobody talked about this. It was still, like, are they in the attic? Are they quiet? And and it's very different now. People are much more open about it. There's less stigma. Though actually, I think our current administration has created an enormous amount of stigma, which is not a good thing. Kind of took it back 10 years for a lot of reasons. And I think it's getting rid of the stigma is a good thing. People suffer from things. And it's amazing how much they suffer from and how much can be done to alleviate a lot of it. But do you find that people are more open now, are seeking help more than they used to, and the families are involved with them?
I think overall that's true. Of course, it comes down to the individual or the family, or maybe even a subculture that might be closed off to that to some degree. But I think overall that's true. Education to the communities played a vital role, and addressing like the issues of depression or anxiety as an illness rather than there's a character fault in the individual has been crucial to start addressing the secrets, getting the secrets out. Once we get them to the light, things are much better. If you keep it secret and keep it repressed, there's really little chance for growth or change.
Susan?
Well, I have a few questions. What are some of the behaviors that you see that manifest themselves with a lot of anxiety or depression?
Well, there's a lot of self-medicating that can occur through drug and alcohol, overeating, over-exercising as well can be involved. From anxiety, a lot of the obsessive-compulsive behaviors can spring forth. So we'll see individuals trying to control their environment, and therefore they're trying to control the internal anxieties. The depression of sleeping too much or not being able to sleep enough, feelings of emptiness or worthlessness, struggles of overbearing sadness, those kind of symptoms occur. In kiddos, you'll probably see, if they're experiencing depression, more issues with anger and acting out behavior, where adults may be more withdrawn.
Wow. So with the adolescents, are they easier or harder to work with?
Oh, I love adolescents. I do. I used to teach school a long time ago as well. I loved working with the adolescent population. They are full of energy and life and a curiousness that may not be there in later years, but they have their own challenges, and they're going through so many physical changes and changes in their body and perceptions of things and hormones that it can be an emotional roller coaster. And then when you add in the social factors and peer groups and trying to find where you fit in and the whole insecurity of middle school and high school, it's a challenging group. But they actually are one of my favorites to work with.
Why?
Why?
They sound harder. Why? They sound harder.
Because they're full of life. And you can feel the energy when you're in the room with them. They have a sense of humor that keeps you a little off balance, so you're always having to stay focused and sharp. They're open to, they haven't built up as many calluses or walls as a lot of adults, and they're not quite as street smart in one sense, or as jaded or cynical as adults can sometimes be. And this is a general statement, but I think that's why I enjoy them, even though they are hard or challenging at times, yes.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things about the youth, and especially working with them, when you do help them, it can really make such a difference. And they are young. That's something they're going to carry a lot longer than somebody who's a lot older. So there's always, I think, that if I'm reading you right, I think that's probably one of the rewards that, there is recidivism and they tend to fall back into things, but sometimes it makes a difference for life.
I think so. And if you're 15 or 16, you haven't gone through the life choices that will, shut certain doors that you'll never be able to go through again. Life is fresh and new. You have numerous opportunities, and decisions that they make at that age will start impacting them for the rest of their lives. So intervention at an early age is crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hardest part for teens is getting them to open up. Yeah, they don't even open up to their friends many times on these things.
That's true. One thing I like to do with teens is a thing called reflective distance. And so you may be playing a game with them. You may have them with the windshield time. You'll hear that phrase. It's almost like if you can distract them from a discussion that's simply sitting across the table and saying, the old standard line of how do you feel about that? But you start to talk to them about other things while you're kind of distracting through a game, and going through a backdoor approach is really helpful with kids, really helpful with adolescents.
And it's building trust. It's getting them to feel that, you're not evil. You're actually listening to me. And most kids, like you said, they're not that jaded. There are some, but they open up pretty quickly once they feel, I can trust him.
Right. That's the essential part to therapy, building a relationship, having trust with the individuals that you work with. If you can establish that, then there's hope. If you can't establish trust, then you're probably not going to progress very far.
It's when we did the mental health services training for the County of Los Angeles for their jail suicide prevention in the jails. That's pretty common. People wind up in jail the first time and they think they've hit rock bottom, that they want to commit suicide. They're depressed usually. And a lot of people in jail do suffer. They're estimating maybe 30% of the population has a mental illness, a fairly easily diagnosable one. And the police are trained to command and control. Very different. Right. They give you an order, you better follow it. Well, the person who's not in the right state of mind doesn't like command and control. It makes them more nervous, makes them angrier, and they become very defensive. And that's usually when we have the issues between police and the population at large, who for some odd reason is acting erratically or has been called on or somebody's afraid of them. More often than not, when they're trained, the police can lower the voices, talk, be calm, and night and day difference. And you can make a very big difference in the prison population, where again you're developing trust between the command and control police, who's now actually listening to you. Right.
Well, the trust I think that comes from training, and you touched on that. There are a lot of police departments, Oklahoma City being one, that have developed a program to train their officers on how to deal with individuals who are struggling with mental illness or stress or that are emotionally unstable, where you can de-escalate a situation very quickly and satisfactorily for everybody involved. And some of that may be giving options to an individual, depending on the situation, if it's appropriate. But can you walk to the car without being cuffed? At times, that is just means the world to the individual who's struggling.
Yeah. I know in California it's a little bit different. At least in Southern California, they have to cuff you. But they do it in a way that they say, look, I'll cuff you in front. I'm not going to put it behind you. I'll leave it loose. And they wait. They wait until you agree. They don't force it. And that makes a big difference. And I remember talking to police who they apologized to the family. I'm so sorry we have to do this. It's the rule. We do it to protect ourselves and to protect them. But they can tell who's really at risk or who's a danger to themselves and who isn't.
I'd like to clarify on that too. Yeah, if a person is being arrested, for a violation of a law, then of course they have to follow their protocol. What I'm speaking of is more of an individual who is in danger of hurting themselves, and they're going to be transported to a hospital situation.
Right. And here they still have to cuff you. That's the problem. And they do it, like I said, they try to do it as gently as possible. And most of the time it works, every so often, depending how far someone is or if they're really angry or psychotic, it could be a different outcome. But they try to avoid the violent outcome, the raising of voices or anything like that. More often than not, it works. It works because they don't feel they're being attacked or controlled, especially if somebody's paranoid. And you come at them with command and control. Well, that's going to make them feel even more paranoid.
Exactly.
And what's the old saying? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean somebody isn't out to get you. So.
True. Well, compassion, warmth, understanding, those are all basic fundamentals for not only good therapy, but just general decent human behavior.
What got you into this?
I taught school for many years, inner city schools, Oklahoma City, Houston, briefly in Austin as well. And I saw struggles with the students, elementary students at that time, and with their families. And I felt, I feel more called to working with that than I do in teaching reading or math. And so I started to explore, how I might be able to be of service to kiddos and their families through another avenue, and ended up in counseling.
That's great. It's funny. I mentioned to you that.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
I had a quick question. I was struck by what you said about adolescence and the hormonal changes and physical changes. Of course, it applies to grade school and middle school. And I was wondering about unexpected reactions to medications and how that can play a role. Have you seen unexpected or behavior or anxiety produced or precipitated by unexpected reactions to medications?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. It's probably been, I'm going to compare my experience to what I hear in the press. In my experience, it has occurred. I have seen that on occasion. But if you recall a few years ago, it was all over the press about Prozac being a very negative and dangerous medication. Originally, it started out that it might be a medication that caused suicidal ideation in adults and adolescents. They've kind of backed off of the older adults population, and now my understanding is they're concerned more about the impact for adolescents and young adults. That is true, and they are taking steps to monitor and correct that, and we advise every one of our clients who receive medications that might start to increase those feelings to have their family watch for that or caretakers watch for that. But yes, I have experienced that occasionally in people that I've worked with. Increased anxiety, increased depression, or suicidal ideation has occurred.
How about with things like acne medication? I know that when my son was a teenager, he was taking medication that later they said it caused anxiety, and it definitely did with him. And I used to say to him, I said, well, let's practice the 2-hour rule. Probably this is just a brain chemistry surge, and it'll get better if and only if you stop obsessing about the negative thoughts and give it 2 hours. And it seemed to help sometimes.
Well, what you're doing is you're reframing his experience there. The anxiety, let's give it time. In other words, it's not, I'm experiencing this now, it's never going to end, which can induce kind of a panic or a panic attack feeling. So you're showing a beginning and an end to what you expect as far as the anxiety experience goes. Yes, some other medications other than psychotropic medications can cause those kind of experiences, and it depends on the individual. And I think that's one thing that's kind of frustrating about the mental health field, that a lot of the medications and combinations of medications take 3-4 weeks before we're seeing any kind of impact. Some happen much quicker, but a client can become very frustrated with that. Why am I taking this medication for 3 weeks? I don't notice any difference. And then once you've found the medication, you have to fine-tune the milligrams, times of day that you take it, combinations with other medications. So it truly is an art, but probably the most frustrating aspect of many of our clients' lives.
Yeah, and one thing that happens a lot is that many of the psychiatrists who do the prescriptions have a very odd tendency of titrating upward. In other words, I'm sorry, titrating downward. So they give you a heavy dose to start and then bring it down, rather than a lower dose, which is safer, and bring it up. And I think that's probably, now it's getting better. I would say 10, 15 years ago, not so good. They are learning that microdoses many times are safer and actually work better than the big macro dose or the overdose. And the other thing they're finding, which is very interesting, is that the health of your stomach can do more for your brain many times than doing some of the meds that can actually hit the brain too hard. Again, if they're too large a dose, because the stomach is the precursor to the neurotransmitters in the brain. The serotonin all forms in the stomach first, works its way into the brain. They're figuring that out now. That they did not know that in the old days, but I think 15 years ago they started realizing that. Wait a minute, they're not kidding when they say that the way to a man's stomach or to his heart is to his stomach. It's probably pretty true. So there is a little bit of that, and
you're touching on a whole movement in therapy, and that's really kind of a wholeness movement.
Yeah,
the whole individual, not just what's going on between the ears or in the soul, but how does the body impact those kinds of feelings as well. We have a program here in Oklahoma called Health Home, and it's a program that initially wraps around services for the individual or the client being served. So you'll have a psychiatrist, you'll have a nurse, you may have a nutritionist or a PCP involved in helping to supplement the therapy that's going on with the client.
that's great. How have those worked out?
So far, so good. I've seen a lot of improvement in families appreciating the extra support that they receive. And it's great to have professionals from different disciplines coming together.
That's wonderful.
And providing more of a whole service for the person.
That's true. I was lucky when I was early teenager. I was studying martial arts, and one of my teachers, who I was with for almost 10 years, was actually a special ed teacher as his real job, and at night he taught martial arts. But he had a very different way of dealing with people's emotions, the tiredness, aggression, and it worked. And this is a long time ago. But it's interesting how some of those same approaches worked then, they still work now. And it wasn't an approach of, in that case, they didn't have a lot of meds. I mean, we were on first generation Thorazine in those days, and that it was better than nothing, but it was tough.
So what did he do, Rick? Did he smack you around?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a martial arts school. You get smacked around.
You're tying into something bigger than the individual.
Yeah,
and I think that's crucial, especially for elementary kids on up who are needing belonging on through adolescence, to be involved in something beyond just my own world.
Right, and whether it's sports or martial arts or anything, any kind of hobby.
The military even.
The military, that has helped a lot of people. Yeah. So that can get you in trouble too, but that's another issue. You get shot at the military.
Well, yeah, it wasn't very good for the mother.
And look what's going on in the military now. This is something that really from about, actually all the world wars we've had all the way through now, war is not a pretty thing. Our ability to kill each other is pretty advanced. And these people are coming back with a lot of PTSD because of the post-traumatic stress disorder. They are seeing things they're not ready for. And the brain has a way of grooving on things that scare it, on make it nervous, make it fear. It creates the anxiety, and it's not a good thing. I mean, we're dealing with more and more of that. I'm sure you probably get your share of veterans who come in with PTSD.
We do, no doubt about that. That is a major population needing services. No doubt. The PTSD situation, we see it primarily, and especially in the press, targeting military. But trauma itself is probably one of the newer focuses, in the last 5 years or so, that professionals are addressing and saying, a lot of the physical illnesses that people are reporting are really related to trauma earlier in life. And we know that if you've experienced significant trauma early in life, that it can shorten your life expectancy. So even as a kiddo, having horrific things happen can affect the longevity of your life and your physical health in general.
Well, and then there's traumatic brain injury. So many people coming back with that.
Yes, and studies have been done regarding getting our servicemen and women back so quickly from the front into what we consider the normal daily life, and that may play a factor in some of the symptoms with PTSD, whereas back in World War II, they're coming back on ships, and it's taking much longer, to get back into the environment of home.
That's a very crucial point. We used to have built-in decompression from a war zone back to society. And now 24 hours, you're back home. They've had cases. I know there was one, I think it was in South Carolina or maybe North Carolina, where a special forces guy comes back. He's just been in major war, comes back, his wife hassles him for something, he kills her. And it's not because he didn't love her or anything. It was an enemy at that point. He had not yet decompressed. And it's happened more than once. People, if you've never been in a war environment, you don't realize how different war is and how the senses are heightened from when you get back to the world, if you will. It's a very different feeling, and it takes a while to get you out of that. I lived in a country for 3 years where there was a lot of terrorism. You walked and you were alert, and you looked at things you never would have done. Your senses were this close to jumping at any one time. Because you don't know. You could be hit by a bomb. You could be hit by a terrorist sniper. It kept you alert. Not a good feeling all the time.
Detrimental to your health overall.
It does. It does.
Producing chemicals in your body that keep you at a level of stress that will eventually break the body down and the mind as well.
Right. You're generating more cortisol than anyone should.
Yes.
Susan?
I'll never forget when my son came back from Afghanistan. We were it was Memorial Day. We were in Hawaii, and we were shopping, and we were in his car. Suddenly, there was an impromptu fireworks celebration for Memorial Day over Waikiki, and I can tell you, he was not enjoying that. In fact, he turned on the radio really loud, and then he started telling me about how each firework sounded like a specific mortar. They were mortared a lot when they were, he was in the Marines. They were mortared a lot in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And he still says that he works too much. He did not re-enlist, but I'm wondering if you ever see these types of behaviors, Shawn, in veterans, where they develop behaviors to cope. And while they have positive aspects, they're kind of a double-edged sword.
Yes, of course. There's a lot of self-medicating, a lot of anger. Some of the vets I've worked with, things that we may take for granted, hearing the police helicopter or the news helicopter at night can put you back in Vietnam, can put you back in wherever you served. So we do a lot of grounding techniques for the individual, helping them realize where they are in the present. And I think that, we need continued services for all of the vets and improved services through the VA for them, and those that we can help in the community coming together. In Tulsa, there's a group called the Coffee Bunker, and they're a group of peers that get together and find it beneficial and helpful for them. And so those kind of things are really encouraging to see, kind of grassroots responses to the situations that they face.
That's good.
I worry about my son a lot because he's doing really well on paper. He became really obsessed with working. So now he just finished he's working on his dissertation in mechanical engineering. But he can't sleep. So he goes long stretches of time without sleeping, and he just works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, there's a benefit to that. And society says, isn't that great? Look at you getting your PhD. That's wonderful, receiving your doctorate.
That's true.
But at what price? At what price?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're showing a good sense of balance, a need for balance there. And that may, I don't know your son, obviously, but that may be a way of self-medicating and coping. And, there are ways, whether with medication or not, that we can improve sleep.
And also what happens, Susan, a lot is when they can't sleep is they don't want to sleep because you don't know what kind of dreams they're having, there's a lot of that.
Oh, that's true.
There's a lot of, I've known a lot of veterans throughout the years, and they say when they sleep, they remember. They remember
Yes.
in their nightmares. So it's like night terrors.
Exactly.
Yes.
And some of our folks are able to actually, through some training, go into the dream and have a level of awareness where they can shape and control some aspects of the dream. But, if you're afraid or terrified of going to sleep because of the things that you experience, you wouldn't want to go to sleep. You'd avoid it in any way that you can.
Well, there's one treatment you're probably very familiar with it, which is EMDR. I think it's
Yes,
eye motion desensitization reprogramming, I think, or reprocessing. And they it's not like hypnosis, but it's similar, but they put you in your situation and they leave you there. They try to work it so that it gets rid of the effect on you. And they said it's been very, very effective. I know people who've gone through it and it did help them. When they hear that pop, it doesn't make them jump into a fearful situation. And it doesn't take that long either. I think some people I know did 6 or 7 sessions and they got rid of a lot of it. So
that's what I've heard too. I'm not trained in that specifically, but it is a very popular treatment right now, specifically for PTSD. Mm-hmm. And so if they find benefit from it, I really encourage it. Studies are out and debates and how stats go as to how effective it is, but like you say, personal experiences, I was helped by this, and that's the bottom line.
I know an Air Force captain. She is a psychiatrist. She's combining, really interesting, she's combining Indian chanting, American Indian, like Native American chants, with EMDR and some other methods, and she's achieving a sense of results so far. So it's interesting because that's, again, music therapy.
Sure.
So it's a little bit of music therapy with the EMDR. It's an interesting combination.
It is, and you're involving multiple aspects of your body. Mm-hmm. Your physiology, everything's involved. And once you can, and that even applies to education and learning, a multi-faceted learner, if you can combine more aspects of the body rather than just sitting and talking, you're probably going to increase your chances of success.
Yeah, that's good. So what do you see as some of the things emerging in treatments? You mentioned the wholeness or the holistic approach to therapy, which I think is wonderful. Do you think that's one of the up and coming things? Pharma is still very big in treatment. Not all psychiatrists are pumping it as much as they used to, at least from what I've been reading. Or at least they're titrating much smaller on up, and it makes a big difference. But what do you see as some of the trends?
I'm sorry, Rick, go ahead.
I was just saying, what do you see as some of the trends or the treatments that you think might really help in the future?
Well, I think the holistic approach is very nice. I'm interested a lot personally in probably a spiritual aspect too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people tend to separate psychology or psychiatry from the spiritual, and I think that's a mistake to make a distinction there, because you are dealing with the whole person. So I'm interested in seeing that occur more. Transgender population seems to be a primary focus at this point in the discipline as well. So where trauma was really a large focus a few years ago, and still is, transgender populations and how to serve them is probably, gosh, that's maybe what I'm hearing more than anything else out there right now. But cognitive behavioral therapy with some medication continues to be the tried and true method overall.
One of my theories is that our youth in particular suffers from affluenza. They've never worked hard. They don't like working. They don't achieve that much. They never move out of their houses. Yeah,
Right.
And as a result, they never experience independence. They're dependent, which makes them dependent on so many things. And the other thing is, when you just mentioned the spiritual side of it, if you look at what is it, the AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Their whole 12-step program has a lot to do with religion, and it seems to be one of the best ways to work people out of it. I've known a lot of guys who've been through that, and boy, has it changed them. I mean, a lot. Really positive changes.
AA started as a Christ-based program.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah, and then became a little more open, and a little more general for the population. But it started out that way, and really holding a person responsible for their own behaviors, and at the same time admitting, there are things that are beyond your own control. Mm-hmm. And you're right; it has been very successful.
Well, I have a question, though, and I'm going to take a little bit of an issue with you, Rick. I think, yes, there's affluenza, but there's a lot of invisible poverty, and a lot of adolescent homelessness, and I think that's kind of the opposite.
I think that's a different issue.
You see a lot of homeless adolescents.
Yep,
in,
but that's a little bit different. Yeah. And the reason I think it's a little bit different is because, again, those are people who don't want to be at home, maybe, or they have no choice. A lot of them just, hey, why work? And I've read a lot of stats of kids going, hey, I'm on welfare. It's cool. I get $1,500 a month and I do nothing. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of poverty, though.
There is.
And lack of options.
Yep,
and I think it's
that's
invisibilized, and there's a lot of blaming the victim.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true.
So that's kind of a problem. What do you see, Shawn?
I see a need for a sense of belonging with family primarily, and then again something bigger than yourself, and that may be through churches or religion or through other activities, like you had mentioned, the martial arts. I see a need for increased responsibility as a person is able, because eventually they will be out in the world. Being able to identify self-worth and meaning, and being able to distinguish that from a lot of what media represents and would like to sell to an individual, I think is extremely important, to be able to discern, well, what is true and what is just trying to sell tennis shoes, or this is the way to look or to be. And we've seen that with the whole body images of our young ladies in particular over the last years.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's not necessarily the most positive imagery on TV, that's for sure.
Well, it's not attainable for most.
That's true.
And, for a very small percentage, and that doesn't guarantee happiness. And then when you are photoshopping or airbrushing and then representing this is how a 13-year-old girl or 16-year-old girl should look, I take real strong issue with that.
Yep,
It's not a reasonable expectation.
No. Well, we are just about at the end of our time. Shawn, what should people do if they do get these feelings of anxiety, of depression? What's one of the best things they can do?
Talk. Don't suffer alone. In some of the AA discipline, there's a statement about secrets keep us sick, and we've mentioned that about taking things out of darkness into light. Talk. Reach out, whether that's a peer, that may be a family member, it could be a mental health professional, could be a spiritual advisor, person that in your church or synagogue, but get involved in expressing how you feel. No need for shame. We all face issues and have our own personal challenges, so I would advise that first and foremost. And if you're feeling like you are going to hurt yourself or hurt others, either get with a counselor, dial 911 for assistance, though many may be afraid to do that. Go to the nearest ER. Do whatever you can to take care of yourself and those that care about you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, Shawn, it's been a real pleasure, and I will reiterate what I said at the beginning. Thank you so much for what you do, because it's more important than most people even realize, and we appreciate that. Susan?
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
Oh, yes, definitely. And we always have one final question. Now, what is like the one thing that you think has given you an edge in life?
Oh, my spiritual life is my foundation. And I think that for me, that is the one thing that I can truly count on, regardless of how much hair I still have, how much weight I put on, how well the job's going. That is crucial. That's my foundation. So that gives me an edge, no doubt about it.
That's great.
It's really wonderful.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you both very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, and I
And-
apologize for my voice, but it was just great to have you.
Yeah, she
Very-
usually talks
very
a lot more
inspiring.
on the show, so she told me at the beginning, you may have to talk more, so I just jumped in for her.
Thank you.
Well, we wish you well.
And for all you people watching on YouTube, please subscribe, give us feedback, and if anybody would like to get a hold of you, Shawn, what's the best way to do it?
Oh, the best way to reach me will probably be contacting Dayspring Community Services in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
That's the best way to reach me.
And we've been
And we're
showing that
listed on the
website.
web. You can reach us through that.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you. And for all you people watching, please don't hesitate to give us feedback and come back next week. We appreciate it. We'll see you all soon. Have a happy new year, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Shawn. Great job.